can't believe we're talking about this in September, 9 months later.
I'm not supposed to talk about this anymore.
Right? Is it talked out?
I'm going to get in trouble for talking about this more.
For talking about this more because you keep talking about it
I told my community I was going to take a break from talking about this because people are like, really? Again?
I mean, fair enough. It's funny though because we've just had this conversation. Hey everybody, welcome to another Inside Tabletop. I'm back from Solo Town with Chris from Loads of War Games and Hobbies, and we are going to be filming 3 of these today. We thought we'd kick it off with I don't know, I don't think this is controversial anymore, but you've had people still talking about it. We're talking about, this conversation came about because of a conversation you had in your store, and I just reviewed the new accessory cards and Arcane Journal for the Warriors of Chaos in Warhammer the Old World. So we're having this is a Warhammer the Old World bit. Again, why are we still talking about it? Kind of an update. But this came out of a conversation you had with a customer buying the cards, and let's talk about that first. Let's get
right into it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, like, it's no surprise to anyone in Canada or like US, I guess, equivalent price, but like, it's $50 for like a little card pack for Old World. Yeah. And I guess the customer is like fully willing to buy it and support us or whatever, which is great. And I was appreciative, but we had a little conversation about like why might this thing cost more than any other card pack?
It's like 40 cards, 50 cards. I should have grabbed it.
They're not big.
It's the unit profile.
They're not like the indexes card packs, which are bigger and have more cards. And so, and it's a legitimate question, right? It's like, why am I paying such a premium for something, for a game I love, when everybody else gets like their card packs for cheaper, right? So, and my of course my initial reaction is like, yeah, that does suck, obviously, but I think it's a bigger question. I think that's what we'll get into here, of what Games Workshop, their expectation of like what money they need to make for this fairly, like, and of course I'm going to get yelled at here right now, for a smaller product range,
sure,
a smaller game, something they're probably printing in much smaller numbers. And I think there's like a premium that they're attaching to that because, and this customer who is fully aware of, they have a fully painted army that they've had for years, and the only thing that customer needs to buy for their collection is the new Arcane Tome and the cards if they want them. Like, they're not mandatory, but like they're cool to have. Or whatever.
They have a giant Warriors of Chaos army collection.
So there's only like this much money to make in that one moment.
Sure.
And that's sort of like I think that's ultimately the thing that's happening there is you're paying a premium because you already have stuff in a weird way.
Yeah. And what feeling is that guy having because they feel like they're almost paying rent on their hobby this way, right? And almost a more rent than they feel like they should necessarily be paying for what they're receiving physically. And I think that's an interesting topic for today is why is this happening? And the idea here is not to cast judgment. Like, I don't think either of us want to do that on people who are super excited about Warhammer the Old World and what their expectations are of where that game's going to go, and then what the dribs and drabs coming out are costing them. Yep. And then the psychology or sort of like the viewpoint online, because we can't speak for the whole world. We can only speak for our local area and people playing of what success looks like. Because I think what's interesting is, and if we hold up 3 pillars, we're gonna go back to January of 2024, right? Old World is cycling up for launch. It's all anybody's talking about.
Like the whole internet's talking. Like anyone who does like any sort of like hobby content,
Warhammer's back, baby.
Is just they're looking at the views on all these videos and being like, wow, this is the only thing that you want to talk about now because it just gets do a Warhammer Old World video, get 10,000 views basically. That's
it. It's the number one thing everyone's talking about. And why? And I think we said this in January is novelty.
Sure.
It's less about the idea that they will then be in that game ecosystem and hobby, and more the rubbernecking of what's going to happen.
Sure.
So I think the excitement, and I think it's proven today now about the Old World, was not for the vast majority of people that were in the hullabaloo creating the noise. It was more about how it left and how it was coming back than it was a dedicated resolve to go and play it, right? To go and get excited about it and play it afterwards. And so now here we are in September, And the Warriors of Chaos cards and book and a few new miniatures.
Or up for pre-order.
Or up for pre-order, that's right. They are part of like an onslaught of releases in the next 4 weeks. So they went on pre-order last weekend, right?
Yep.
And they'll come out mid-September. What else comes out in September? We've got them advertising.
Everything comes out.
An entirely new edition Kill Team, like 14 new Skaven kits and a Skaven Battle Tome.
Just gonna dump it all one day.
They just announced they're doing Chaos Dwarves with Forge World.
There's some Blood Angel stuff.
There's a bunch of Blood Angel stuff coming out. We've just had a Blood Angel army box launch. Like any one of those things used to be a whole month's releases.
Absolutely.
And so I think the expectation back in January that was created by all that for people that were excited about the old world and playing it was that was going to be the new big in group and it was going to come back the way it was in the past. What's the reality of that today in your store?
Oh, here we go again. Okay.
I guess is the question.
Oh man, I hate being the guy who has to say this stuff, but it's like I am such a huge fan of like the Warhammer Old World.
We both are.
We are, yeah. And I played it for the old. Fantasy was my go-to game for years, and painted like I don't know, bloody hell, like 12 armies or something like that for loved it. Right.
First army you painted when I hired you in Square One actually was a fantasy.
So I always have to say that first, so that people like don't shoot me. Like,
please don't shoot me. I love this thing.
I love this too, man. Like I want to see it succeed. So there's this like dichotomy between like people's expectations and what it looks like on the shelf in a store.
And realistically, too, in January, I think that expectation wasn't out of line. Like there was so much talk about it and so much fervor and excitement.
Right.
You kind of expect it to stay that way.
Sure.
And not just kind of get like out a week and it's over every like 2-3 months. Like that feels more. I can understand when you have this built up expectation in your head, a level of feeling like when it actually isn't the same community that you went back to. Because you're also thinking about like, it's that idea of like your Phantom X. You know what I mean? Like Warhammer's kind of some people's Phantom X where it's this game. Yeah, they play new games today and yeah, those games are fun. But they really miss the good old days of everyone being super excited about Warhammer and square basing and rank and flank being this great big thing. And so when they don't walk in on release day for Warriors of Chaos Arcane Journal and be surrounded by 20 other guys that play Warhammer Fantasy Battle, I can understand feeling a bit let down, right?
Sure.
Like you've built this thing up in your head that it's going to go back to being the way it was.
Yeah, and our customers are looking for us to be excited because like maybe they don't have a person playing that they play with regularly, and they're like they come to their local bar and they're like, hey, you like this too, right? And so there's I feel that a lot with games that are smaller like that they need to know that it matters and that the money they're spending means something. But yeah, so two things, like what does it look like right now on the shelf essentially? Because this is always like a good, I think, visual aid for people that to see how much money it can make or is capable of making, or could you even get in?
Like if you wanted to be like the greatest.
Yeah, if I was going nuts on this, we're talking like maybe a handful of plastic boxes for each release. Yeah, which is a shrinking range, by the way. So it comes out a bit larger, and then they call this like splash releasing.
Yeah, and
then they'll cut it down as time goes on because like they don't sell as much, and it starts to go more to the direct route. And then we're talking like the card packs go like they're basically gone as soon as they come out. And then the arcane journals are like the rule books basically are the main thing you can stock. And then the big Battle Force boxes. So like if you wanted to stock everything, you'd maybe have like a 4 foot by 6 foot bay that could probably carry
the whole line
of
what's available currently in this.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's that. That's what it is.
Does it change out? So like when the next Live and Battle Forces come out, do the old ones become unavailable to order and you have to?
I haven't.
The new ones out.
I haven't experienced that yet because I think what they've made, like they made initially on the Battle Forces, they're kind of, the Battle Forces are aimed at the people that aren't really buying it right now.
Yeah.
Which is kind of it. Yeah. So I was going to say that as my next point is like who's actually buying old world stuff right now. It is like 95% people that are like, oh, I missed out on buying that. I'm going to add this to my collection. Oh, the Hell Cannon's coming back. I'm definitely getting a Hell Cannon. I always wanted a Hell Cannon. And then the people that are like, okay, I want to play Old World with my Chaos Warrior army that I have already. I'm going to update my rules and go from there. So that's almost entirely who's buying it right now. But there are a handful of people that are played Total War, the video game, because that's like their only experience with the old world is they played Total War, which is a fantastic game. If anyone hasn't played it, it's really, really cool. And they just like, they see this come out and they're like, oh, I never got to play this because I was basically a teenager or a kid or maybe an adult that just missed the window on it. So there's like this weird nostalgia that comes from a video game to play it. So those people, some of those people have picked it up.
I'm sure in like the comments, what we're going to hear too is there are some stores whose owners are so passionate about making this happen. They've taken the gamble of stocking that whole range and actively trying to make new players.
And they're getting butchered for it.
You think so?
I know so.
Okay.
I have a couple examples of friends.
Okay.
I have friends in the area that own hobby stores.
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
I'm not gonna name names.
Yeah.
No, I'm not gonna name names. But look, like we all do this to ourselves sometimes as business owners, where
you gamble with your own money.
You buy things with your heart or something stupid like that, which is the worst thing to do in business. And Old World, I'm sure it got a lot of stores that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm sure some succeeded. There's going to be some where that worked, and I'm sure in the comments we're going to hear that like, no, we committed, we were really passionate about it, we were building a new Old World community match. It's going to have happened out there for sure.
And
someone's going to have made a go.
There was some success. So like I'm exaggerating a little bit. Like this particular shop bought like 20 or 30 of all the big army boxes on launch or whatever. Yeah, and like of course like.
And some of them will have done things like curate the AOS line to model, you know what I mean? Like have it like all stocked together. And here's our base adapters that we sell, and here's our 3D printers.
100%. And I think if you're willing to put that effort in, there is a ton of.
You can make it happen.
You can make it happen.
But
absolutely.
But if you put that much effort in, you can make any game happen.
That is ultimately where I always go. Is like, and I used to have these conversations with other Games Workshop managers. Like we go down to these meetings and stuff and chat about our strategies for like when we get back to our shop. And like sometimes like, and this is like well after the Lord of the Rings has kind of like already failed. People are like, oh, I think I'm going to try and bring Lord of the Rings back. And then I'd have another buddy be like, yeah, but if you just put that effort into selling more 40K, you'd probably make a lot more money. And ultimately,
Jay Griffiths would have called this the Alberta Gorka Morka. They're like, they were getting phone calls being like, how have you sold this much Gorka Morka? And he's just like, there's just wawing happening in the background, and all of his guys are wearing face paints and have mohawks, and you're like, oh, that's how.
Oh, that's how. Yeah.
Because these maniacs have all watched Mad Max 6,000 times and gotten a bunch of kids excited to do this.
Yeah.
Like, you can make anything.
You can,
happen,
and that ultimately that's where like this game need and we'll get more into that, but this game just definitely needs that, right? Sure. But and certain items like like the Bretonians sold incredibly well.
Yeah, of course.
Like so, if you had 20 army boxes, you probably sold them all.
Yeah.
Because there was so much hype.
How those Tomb Kings sell?
The Tomb Kings are still there, and that's part of one of those things where like you kind of had to be around when it was selling in stores to understand. I think what the limitations were going to be when it was coming back.
Sure.
And for me, like it's always burned into my brain. This is something I had a Tomb King army I loved. That was one of my favorite Warhammer armies. I took pride in it because I was one of the only people in Ontario with a painted Tomb King army that was going to tournaments of the hundreds of people I played with or whatever. So I knew how poorly they sold. Like we would joke, back like their battle force would just sit on the wall and collect dust and.
Well, there was a joke a long time with Games Workshop managers. Whatever army that they weren't possibly able to sell in the edition was the one they brought to staff tournament because they could buy the kits off the wall and get rid of them.
There you go.
That was a joke for a long time. And they were like, "Man, this stuff's collecting dust. I got too many.
Yeah.
I'll just make my army for the next staff tournament from this section of the wall, and we'll make it happen, like no matter what." And the flip side of that was then there was a painted army in the case, and sometimes it would actually cause a few.
Yeah, of course, because people
because you're passionate.
It's like what do you call it? Self-repeating or whatever. Like if
a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. So if you don't see any cool painted Tomb King armies, you're probably not going to sell any either. So it's one of those things.
I do want to ask then about the emotional half of this because we're talking about the practicalities of you being a shop owner and stuff though. But let's talk about the expectations and how I do understand that need for validation that people that came out of this giant hype train have 9 months later to want to tell us it's the best selling thing after 40K and it's doing really well in my area and all the things we're going to read in the comments, you know what I mean, of this video.
Of course. No, for sure.
Because I don't think it's unfair to have that expectation. And two, I completely empathize with people who want to have it be popular because they get to play more games. This is the same thing with me wanting there to be better on-ramps into the tabletop industry because I want to play more games. I'm investing in my future happiness of being able to discover something cool, something somebody's made. That I understand people coming out of January's hype train and being like, yeah, it's doing really well. Yeah, I want it because they want it to be doing
absolutely.
Really well.
And let me match that enthusiasm for a second and just before those comments are getting typed and say, I think it has done really well.
I think so too.
Really, really well. Just like Necromunda does really well.
Yep.
And that's the important thing we have to kind of say is that it's for what it is and what the resources the company's putting into it and the amount of stuff that's coming out that's selling out pretty well. It's doing really, really well.
I think it's meeting their expectations. Yeah. I think it's doing that thing I said earlier as a joke, but it's paying the rent on Square-based gaming still existing at Games Workshop. And I think that's all it needs to do. And I think that's a better pace for the consumer even in a game like Old World where you got to paint a lot of miniatures.
100%.
The blood price is higher than almost any other game.
Yeah.
Right? You got to get a lot of toy soldiers on the table to play a full-size, air quotes, you know what I mean, whatever.
So tackling that emotional aspect, I think that's a really good point. I think that's the more interesting topic now at this point too, is there's an interesting dynamic that happens, I think, with people that collect smaller games. And I think this happens more when they interact more in like retail spaces, I think.
Sure.
Because I think people that just play at home with their buddies, like they don't think about this stuff. They don't really worry about it. But people that are going to these physical spaces that are selling a product and things are commodities and they're almost competing for like attention almost in a weird way.
Of course. You want your team to win.
Exactly. They more than anybody, you know, more than a 40K player or an AOS player or like, you know, some Magic the Gathering player they have to become these like flag bearers for the thing they love, so that in a weird way, like the game doesn't like, you know, they have a feeling that like, oh, we can't like let it lose any steam here. We got to keep the excitement up. We got to so you know, I always love that like those people are like so enthusiastic and they promote really well and they talk about their game and they're very interested in who's playing it, who's getting into it. They're very interested in asking business questions about like how well it's doing, and like they're just collecting all this knowledge, and they want to know. And you can tell too that they're watching a lot of videos and doing research, and they're very concerned with how everyone else is perceiving it. And
I do think that's contagious. I do think that perception that it's, you know, the best selling thing after 40K, yada yada. I think that is. I don't want to use the word echo chamber, but I do think that is the fact that everybody who is enthusiastic about it is enthusiastic about it. Nobody's enthusiastic about Old World right now is coming at it from like a critical mode, right? Whereas a lot of people come at 40K in a critical mode of like, oh, 40K is dead, 40K is failing, 40K is this, 40K is that. And everybody coming at the Old World wants it to win right now.
They understand that it has to be that way, I think, especially right now. You get this with other communities like Infinity and like Lord of the Rings, especially when it was like not supported very much.
Yep.
That they all know the stakes. That like it's like you know they're against the world and like there's like this razor thin edge that they have to stay on to keep their community alive and going, and they know how important it is, especially with Warhammer, because you know it went away before. Right, like they know it can all go away.
That's right.
So
or end. Happiness ends.
I can appreciate that, and I have full empathy for that, and I understand how they think. But there's also an element of like, you know, to regular people that don't necessarily interact in those games, sometimes it comes across as a little cultish.
Sure.
And some of the stuff that they're claiming is a little can be a little crazy sometimes, right? And out of proportion, I guess, with reality, right? But I think like it's
a consumer POV.
Yes.
I think that's
100%.
Ultimately any consumer POV struggles to like see past what their emotional experience is going to be, because the stakes with an emotional reaction, it shouldn't, if I care about something, that thing should be able to put itself on the shelf to make me happy.
Well, yeah.
Right? Or to do right by me, right? Whereas like if you need to sell these card blocks at $50 in order to make the profit that you're committed to making your shareholders, that's one reason. If you want your community to be able to have access to their game aids at a price that they will be happy with, that's another reason. Those two things don't necessarily always line up.
No, for sure.
Right. And so people have a feeling like the decision should be done for my best interest because I keep coming back to you and spending money with you. Then they are going to get to be at loggerheads with that price tag at some point when they feel like, or they don't understand that the reality is to make this project work, it has to cost this much money. And it has to cost us much money because this is what we've committed to making profit-wise for the year. Like, those decisions are just ones and zeros. They're hard and
of
fast.
course.
Like, they don't have any emotion in them. They don't think about the consumer. They think about the end result of sale, right?
Well, and think about the point of view, like going back to the customer's point of view, which I can completely understand too. Being also a customer, is what do you expect when you go online and you see all these things sold out all the time?
Yeah,
like all
it feels unfair.
Well, yeah, it does, but also like it looks like success, right? It looks like it's doing crazy good when there's no context for like how many of these things are being made. We have so many comments of like, well, it would be more successful if they had more stuff, right?
Right? They always say that's almost every like they're the ones holding it back. They're holding it back by not making enough stuff. They're throttling the product, or they're making it not available. They just need to commit to it, and it's like. But they're making what they want to make so it can keep going, right? They're not taking any risk on it by making too much, and they're making what they want to make.
Yep.
Then it's still available. Like, rule books are available. That's all you really need.
Yep.
You can have your cool cards. You can have your dice or whatever extra like widgets and things that are available. But like, if the baseline stuff is always available now, then I think they've fulfilled the sort of like fairness equivalent of all that stuff. And when it comes down to stuff you want afterwards, that stuff's going to come and go because they're not gambling on having too much.
Well,
they're not making skeleton horse archers. You know what I mean? They're going to sit in the warehouse for how many
those lessons were learned. Those lessons were learned.
How many chariots and skeleton horse archers did we have in our stores at one point? I could have made a fort out of skeleton horse archers. I think at one point in a Games Workshop store.
Oh no. Yeah, and I think you're right. It's ultimately it is a sell through strategy. Yeah, of course it is.
But that doesn't love you back the way that the consumer wants to be loved back. And so I have a ton of empathy for the POV of the consumer. And I wish it was more aligned. I wish those two things were more aligned for the consumer and for Games Workshop, because I do think there's daylight in between those two positions and wiggle room on both sides to have it be a Necromunda and have it continue to grow over the next like 10 years. And also for the consumer to feel like they're not just paying rent on a miniature collection that's been sitting for 10 years.
I don't know. Maybe I'm a skeptical person, but like, I feel like the amount of love is not aligned and can't the amount of love is never going to be aligned. No. And that's the thing. That's the thing I worry about.
But
because when it's love, which is what it is driving these people to buy 25-year-old miniatures, 30-year-old miniatures, right? I worry about their hearts, because like Games Workshop is not going to love you back in this current era the same way that you're going to love.
Does.
No
game does. No game does.
But
I got a lot of X's when it comes to miniature games. Let's just say, but I'm not afraid to love, Chris.
Yeah,
that's the thing. I gotta love my heart still. I'm not afraid to love.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is like some people have Warhammer as their Phantom X, right? The girl that got away or the guy that got away. Like, it is a thing that they ruminate over, and I think that's where a ton of this passion comes from. And that's okay, but I think you're right in that it's never going to be what they want it to be. And I think that at the start it was such fanfare and such huge marketing that they felt like it was going to be that thing again.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think the cure, like you said, is that at some point you're letting yourself get let down expecting it to be something else. Build the community you want to have locally. God bless those shop owners that are creating new Warhammer players and like 3D printing bases and doing all that stuff to make it by hook or by crook happen. And the tournament organizers who are running tournaments.
Oh man, amazing people.
Amazing people doing amazing work.
100%.
And there's tons of stuff for you guys to check out online to see how amazing that can be. But ultimately, I think if your expectation is a past experience, you're just going to be let down by whatever's in the future. And you're not going to enjoy the present. You got to enjoy right now. Enjoy the fact that you can buy a Warhammer game and you can find maybe people to play with it.
We're all guilty of mythologizing the past, right? And that's what for sure fantasy it's always going to be dealing with people that played it before and then are coming back to it, is like it's a time in their life they're competing with, not the product itself, right? Yeah. And that's a tough thing to match as we get older.
As you stand there showing up $50 for 45 cards,
yeah, man, like,
you know what I mean, in a book that's going to let you play new 100%. Rules, like to be excited about it. You want an equivalent level of excitement from the people around you and people staying in the shop, and like it's hard to not get that. Yeah. But I think at some point it's your expectation that that's going to happen that's letting you down, and letting go and accepting that this is just a new thing, and if you interact it the way it is today, you can enjoy right now, as opposed to wishing it was a way that it used to be.
100%.
And that's a life lesson. If you got a lot of X's, you learn that life lesson in lots of ways. Oh man. Well, I do hope that customer enjoys his Chaos Warrior army and gets some games in.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that's why they're doing it, because they do enjoy it, and the thing I love about it is it's brought some faces back. It's brought some people back that basically weren't like customers for a while.
Sure. Yeah.
So I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, like as a hobby shop, I'm like, I'm like, if you spend $10 with me, like that you were never going to spend before, like thank you for that gift, right? That helps me get through the week, right? And I'm sure Games Workshop feels the same way too. Like it's money that they didn't have before.
I don't think Games Workshop feels anything, because they're not a person, first of all.
Well, not according to the law, Ash.
But I do think
corporations are people.
Corporations are people. That's right.
So
and can
watch yourself.
And can vote. That's right. Be careful. I'm like a thought police for saying that. But I do think that who is appreciative of it is the very hardworking design team behind the old world, who are in the shadows because their names aren't in the books, but are some OG names. Like Andy Hoare and like all these guys who are like really OG, like Games Workshop staff and employees. I do feel like those guys are probably very pleased and excited that what they made has been received as well as it's been received.
Absolutely.
So I think that's ultimately who I hope is happy with how it's going, because if you made something, you want it to stand on its own. And the old world comes from a pedigree of 40 years worth of game design and some pretty legendary people. And so having it be something that people are that excited about and that passionate about, that they come into your store, that they want other people to be that excited about it, should feel good. And I'm hoping that that's the case. Well, thanks, man. Thanks for the update. I think this was an interesting one because, like I said, we're in September of 2024, and we are drowning in new things for every possible game system, but the old world ain't one of them.
I'm safe on your channel. I can't do any old world updates on my channel for a while. So.
That's fair enough. Yeah, we're gonna put that
people will just come with pitchforks or whatever. So.
I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, okay.
They'll come find you here instead of yelling at me. Thanks for watching, everybody. So where can people find you? They can find you at Lords of War Games and Hobbies on YouTube.
On YouTube, yeah. And then if you want to support us, you can go check out patreon.com/Lords of War Games and Hobbies. Perfect. Or just buy something from the shop. That's cool too.
Come get some paint. Come hang out.
You get something and I get something. That's
right.
Awesome. Yeah.
That's right. Come and hang out. Get one of those dry brushing palettes. Those are my favorite. Anyway, so you can, of course, check out this podcast 3 days early on my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Guerrilla Miniature Games, as well as Patreon exclusive content like the like AMAs we do, the Monday Hang, which is sometimes on a Wednesday, but we do a free episode of that every single month, and then additional content for various games I'm designing and behind the scenes backstage recording sessions. So thanks for watching this one. We'll see you next week for another Inside Tabletop. Till then, I'm Ash. Happy gaming.